Hello everyone, I'm Mandy from Fit to Sew, and actually not Albert Einstein as it seems to be up there. In this video from my So You Want to Make a Bra collection of tutorials, I'm going to be showing you how to fit a fitting band. And although I talk about a fitting band throughout this tutorial and the demonstrations, everything that I show you to do with assessing the fit and making pattern alterations applies to any full band bra pattern. It doesn't have to be just a fitting band. This tutorial follows on from my previous one about how to sew a fitting band, and so if you're not familiar with this term, you're not 100% sure what it is, then please have a gander at that video first, and then this one will make a lot more sense afterwards. So the point of a fitting band is that every time you want to try something new in terms of the cups, the style or the size or design, whatever it is, you won't have to make a whole new bra every time you want to play and try something new. Because as I talked about in my previous video, there's no point in trying to fit the cups if the band that they're going into isn't already properly fitting to you. Because however accurately and carefully you've measured yourself according to the pattern designer's instructions, numbers only are your starting point really. To fit is about shape. Rather than just numbers. There's no substitute for a hands-on fitting. Like I said, however carefully you've measured and drafted and so on, you really need to see how it looks on an actual body, and there's no way of doing that other than with a fitting, and whether you're fitting yourself or whether you're fitting somebody else, because then with an actual bra on, you can easily see where there might be wrinkling, where there might be gapping, where there's any asymmetry, because let's face it, most of us have one side of our body is very slightly different to the other. You can have a look at it like in the old WYSIWYG saying, what you see is what you get. You can't tell that just from a pattern. Because to my mind, what's the point of putting all that effort into making your own clothes or underwear if you're not then going to spend a little bit of time in getting the fit right? So I am sorry if I'm banging on about this a bit, but I am really passionate about fit. That's why I'm called Fit to Sew. Anyway, so in this video, I'm going to talk you through the various fit issues that you might find with your band. And then I'm going to demonstrate how to fix them, because it's all very well to identify something. The main thing is, well, what do I do about it? How can I fix that on my pattern? And I'm going to do this in sequence, section by section. In the description of this video on the YouTube page underneath the video, you'll see that I have broken the video down into sections and bookmarks using a timestamp. So that means that you can just skip to the part that's relevant to you, the alteration that you need to make or whatever it is, without wading through a lot of other information that might not be relevant. But I honestly think that it's probably worth viewing the video first all the way through, just to see everything that's covered. Something might be identified that you didn't even realise was a problem for yourself, or you might have thought, well, all my bras do that, it's just me and I can't fix it. So have a look all the way through, and then, as I say, you can just refer back, skip back and forth to the bits that you need. Because realistically, you're probably going to need to do 2, 3 and possibly even 4 fittings in order to get everything just the way you want it and how it should be. It's kind of, there's a proper way that a bra should fit, and there's the way that you are comfortable with your bra fitting, and that's the balance that you will need to strike, and that's going to take a few attempts to get to, because a bra is a pretty complicated piece of engineering really, and one bit affects another. So for that reason, it's really a good idea to just do a few things, a few alterations at a time, rather than try and fix everything that you can see when you first put the fitting band on. Because one alteration can automatically fix another issue without you kind of realising it. So rather than chasing your tail and making alteration after alteration and it's still not right, if you concentrate on one bit at a time, then and get that right and then move on to the next section, I'm sure you'll find that works out a lot better for you. It's a much less frustrating way of doing it. And this is especially true if you're new to flat pattern alterations. And actually, even if you're quite familiar with it, unless you're really confident that you can think and see in 3D, it is better to go kind of one step at a time. Maybe not one step at a time, but certainly just little baby steps. So it's a good idea to work on your band in the sequence that I show you. I'm not saying by any means that that's the only way to do it, but it is the way that I was taught by Beverly Johnson. To me, it's the most logical way, and it's always worked for me. So that's the way I'm going to show you. Because the thing is that getting a good fit is a process. It's it might seem from what I'm saying, I'm banging on a bit, and maybe I made it sound all a bit long-winded and hardly worth the faff of what I'm talking about. But honestly, putting in the time at this stage, getting your band to fit properly, is really going to save you so much time and effort in the future as you go forward with your bra making. In the end, hopefully, you will have a properly fitting, comfortable, supportive band that's going to be your go-to pattern for every bra that you make in the future. And if you're new to making pattern alterations, you will have picked up a new skill, so that's always a good thing. If you like this video and you find it helpful, please click the like button, and if you click on subscribe to my channel, then in future, every future video that I post, you'll be notified for by YouTube, and you won't have to kind of keep looking to see if she posted anything new recently. So I think I've waffled on for long enough, so without much further ado, let's have a look at how to fit your fitting band. Okie doke, so when I'm doing a fitting, I like to have on hand wonder clips and safety pins, and I like to use a friction marker or something that disappears easily. I like to have a bra back extender handy in case the band is too tight, and some means of measurement, whether it's a ruler or a tape measure. I quite like these little gauge Dubry flips because they're just a lot easier to manipulate than a great long tape measure when you're trying to do tiny measurements. I've got normal pins here. I hardly ever use them, and I like to use the wonder clips, as I've said, because it's very hard to fit yourself into a bra. I find it difficult enough to pin myself into a top or a pair of trousers that I'm making to do a fitting, because you can't get the pins at the right angle, and Lord knows it's bad enough to stab yourself in the finger or the leg when you're accidentally when you're doing a fitting. I shudder to think what it would be like when you're fitting yourself into a bra and you stab yourself. So wonder clips, much more user-friendly, much less risk of getting blood all over the place. And yes, I use a friction marker pen. I've talked about these before, but I like to use something that's going to disappear in between fittings, because if I mark something up in the first fitting and then I fix that and then I try the band back on again, I want to know which markings I've used and which I haven't. So it's easier to just disappear a friction pen mark with an iron, or if you like to use a water soluble pen, you can just dab it off so that you know where you are each time you do a fitting. Of course, if you're much more organized than I am, you might want a variety of colors, and so that you know that your first fitting was red, your second fitting was blue, and so on. But I'm not that organized, so I use a friction pen, but you use whatever you want, as long as you can get nice clear markings that are going to disappear in between fittings. Then I've obviously got my pattern here. I have photocopied onto ordinary white paper the pattern pieces that I'm going to be using to show you how to do the fittings and the alterations. But in reality, I would be making these alterations onto tissue paper. I would trace off my original pattern, or at least the pattern that I've made the fitting band from, straight away, and keep that to one side. It's good to have a master copy, because you can go ahead and make 2 or 3 alterations and start to alter your pattern. And then somehow, for whatever reason, you suddenly think, oh, actually, no, it did work better before. So if you want to scrap the entire thing that you've done and decide, oh, I'm going to go back to square one, it's handy to have square one ready there, rather than try and retrace your steps as to each alteration you may have already done. So try and keep a spare copy. I've got spare tissue paper to add in if I need to make something bigger, to retrace a finished pattern piece when I've done it and all that. So I just have to have everything handy, and then I can just press on with it. So the main thing, I did say this in the introduction, but I can't stress enough that you really do need to try and focus on one area at a time when you're working on the bra. Otherwise it's going to be a bit like juggling plates. You've altered one piece, and then you think, oh no, I'll just go to that piece, and then I'll go back to this piece, and before you know where you are, you're sort of hopelessly confused and just all a bit lost. So I'm going to show you the sequence that I do a fitting in. It's, as I said in the introduction, it isn't the only way, but it's the way that I was taught and the way that I found is quite logical and works for me, and I'm happy with. So I'll just pop this all away and bring the lovely Norma in, and we'll start to assess the fit and see what we can do to fix it. So here we have the lovely Norma wearing the fitting band that I sewed in my previous video, how to sew a fitting band. Norma is a more or less accurate representation of my body. She's not a standard shop mannequin. So you can see that this is what a bra might look like on a real body rather than a properly standard size. Hopefully this will be a bit more realistic for you when you come to judge the fit of yourself or somebody else. In any case, so I've popped this on her, and the first thing to do in a fitting, although I'm looking at her now and I'm itching to adjust the cups. Remember I said before, you kind of really want to adjust the cups because they just look awful, but I'm not doing the cups. Ignore the cups. One thing at a time, and we're doing the fitting band. So check that the band sits around the body in a straight line. So this, given that she's not quite upright, but this more or less is a straight line, so I'm okay about that. What you want to look out for is whether it starts to really rise up at the back too much. That's a real indication that the bra is far too loose, but we'll come to that in a sec. But the main thing is that this is more or less in a straight line. So far so good. That's all right. What now we need to see, is it too loose or is it too tight? Or like Goldilocks, is it just right? So let's turn it round. I have added the bra back extender into this bra in order to deliberately make it far too loose. Now obviously I wouldn't do an initial fitting with the bra back extender in place. You need to check first of all whether you need it, but I need to show you what it looks like when it's too loose. So one thing that's a bit of a giveaway is the strap elastic here. It's not under any sort of tension, which it should be. So that's one sort of little pointer that perhaps this is too loose, and obviously I can get my hand in there, so it's far too loose. But the other thing is that there's obviously I can't show you how something feels, but there's no tension in this back band whatsoever. And in fact, if I bring the original pattern piece in and offer it up against it, you can see how the power net is not being stretched at all. So that's absolutely not what we want it to be. The way an underwired bra works is that the tension in the back band works with the underwires to give the support. So this is far too big. So in my case, it's easy to fix because I'm just going to take this bit out. I will show you what I would do though. So what you need to do is to judge how much to pin out to get the bra to be fitting comfortably, but with this section under a certain amount of tension. So you can't do that with the wonder clips, because if you get the right sort of amount of tension, it's just going to make the wonder clips ping off a bit like a catapult, which we don't want wonder clips whizzing around the place. So I'm going to gauge And when I show you how to do the alteration on the pattern, I'll talk you through a little bit more about exactly how you can gauge how much to pinch out. But currently I'm just pinching out enough that I can feel that there's some tension now in this back band section, and I'm using these pins. Now if you're doing this fitting, whoops, and I'm completely missing either side. If you're doing a fitting on yourself with no one to assist you, sorry, I'm making a pig's ear of putting a pin in, there you go. If you're doing this without anyone to assist you, you kind of need to reach around yourself if you can and sort of pinch out a rough idea, give yourself a rough idea of how big it is. Then you're going to need to take the bra off, pin it where you think would be a good place, and then pop it back on. So it is a palaver. You do need to sort of clear your diary for the day while you're doing it, and you need to be prepared to keep popping the bra on and off. But I've sort of gauged that, and I've pinned it top and bottom. Don't just put a pin in the middle, because that doesn't really give you an idea. You need to gauge how much the elastic is also stretching by, as well as the power net. But of course you can't just do one side, you have to do both sides, because you need to make sure that this is balanced. So I'm coming back over here, and I'm just going to pin this section as well. Sorry Norma, manhandling you a bit here, or person handling maybe I should say, just to be completely PC. Let me just do that. Obviously this would be a lot simpler if you took the bra off, pinned it and popped it back on. But so I've kind of checked by eye, but you can measure it too, but that I've taken it in the same both sides, and already you can sort of see that this is tighter here. I can't get my hand in the same as I did before. So, and some of this wrinkling has sort of gone from the straps a little bit. So that's if it's too loose. I'm going to just quickly whip these pins out more quickly than I struggled to put them in. And we'll have a look at the next thing. Okay, so I'm just going to pop away, take this out and do it back up, and talk to you about what to do if the band is too tight. Okay, so I've adjusted this back to take the extra bits out so you can see it as I would wear it. Now, the thing to decide, and perhaps I should have mentioned this before we talked about taking it in, is before you make any adjustments to the, I was going to say tightness, I don't mean that, but the length of the band, I suppose. Before you make any alterations, you sort of need to decide for yourself where you want the hook and eyes to go, how you want them to do up. So there's a lot of conventional wisdom, if you like, about where you should do up your hook and eyes. And mostly we've been told that you should do it up on the loosest so that you can move your hook and eye in to maintain the right tension as your elastics and the fabrics start to sort of give up the ghost and go a bit saggy or super stretchy. This is a myth perpetrated by the ready-to-wear industry, in my opinion. I think that it demonstrates they have very little faith in the quality of their fabrics and elastics if they are thinking that this whole section is going to wear away, or not wear away, but wear out in the lifetime of a bra, that you're having to keep on doing it up tighter and tighter. That's just me. There might be a reason, a scientific reason or a real reason why people say that, and if so, I don't really care. If there is, then fine. But to my mind, it doesn't really work. And in any case, bra bands are 2 inches apart. So 30, 32, 34. What if you're in between sizes? I am a 35. So if I bought a 34 bra, it would be too tight, even on the loosest one. If I buy a 36 and I wore it on the loosest one, it would be too loose. So you kind of, the bra back adjusters to my mind are just that. They adjust to the size that you need it to be. So any idea of start off here and end up there, I don't agree with. But I like to wear my bras like this. I don't like the look of it done up looser so that you can see the additional rows of eyes. I don't like it. I don't think it looks pretty. I like wearing my bra like this, and I also like the extra kind of padding underneath the hook section here, so there's no risk of it rubbing or hurting my delicate skin. But anyway, sorry, I'm ranting, but this is how I like it to be done up. If you like it to be done up on a looser one, then that's where you need to set it before you start to decide what fit alterations you're going to make. I hope that's kind of logical. So now that I've done this up where I would normally wear it, you can see straight away how the strap elastic isn't wrinkling anymore. It's nicely kind of under tension because it's no longer too loose. So decide where you want your hook and eye done up and then make the adjustments. If you have it done up where you want it to be and you find that you can't breathe, then obviously you need to make it looser. If you can use your hook and eyes to help you gauge, the thing is that obviously, as you saw me just do, if something is too big, you can pinch it out. If something is too small, you have to really guess at how much bigger you need it to be, because it's not easy to tell. If your bra band is too tight, done up on the tightest hook, you can change it onto a looser one. Each one on these hooks and eyes, each row of eyes is about 5/8 of an inch apart. So you can calculate that if it's only comfortable when you have it done up on the loosest one, rather than talk about it, let's do that. If you have to have it done up on there and you actually want it to be done up on this one, you can measure the distance between the two. It's about 1.25 inches. So you'll know that if I have to have it done up on there, then I've got to make the whole band 1.25 inches longer. Let me wrestle Norma back into this. Okay, so the thing is that you have to have tension in the power net, but you can't have it stretched to within 1 inch of its life. I'll talk to you more about this in a minute if I remember when we're doing the alteration, but power net has about a 30% stretch. But you don't want to allow a 30% stretch when you're making alterations or drafting a bra pattern, because that would mean that the power net was permanently stretched to its maximum the whole time that you're wearing the bra. And that's not going to be good for it. The little lycra strands that run through it will start to weaken and snap if they are constantly stretched to the maximum. So when I draft a bra, when I do fit alterations, I like to allow only a 20% stretch ratio. Like I said, that's probably gone, what? When I do it on paper, it will make more sense if I'm not making sense to you currently. But whenever you try the bra on, do not kind of pull this as much as it can in order to get it done up, because that's not how you're going to wear it, and it will be really uncomfortable by the time you've had it on for a couple of hours if that's how you do your bra. So we've made an assessment as to whether or not it's too loose or too tight, and you would have pinched it out if it's too loose and made some kind of wild guess or used the bra back extender. You can see why this is a good idea, because it would give you quite a lot extra to work out where it needs to be for it to be comfortable. Although, to be honest, you would have had to have made quite a fatal error in your initial measurements to have ended up with a pattern that's this much too small. But anyway, that's how it goes. So I would have done that, made it a bit longer or made it shorter, but I'm not going to do any pattern alterations just yet, because now I need to come back round to the front to have a look at what's happening with the bridge section. So remember, we've given ourselves some allowance in here that we can either let out or gives us something to hold on to in order to pin it in more. So now logically, if you do anything to this section, it's going to affect how the band goes around your body. So that's why we haven't finalized anything that I've done in the back, because first of all I need to work out what I'm going to do in the front. So I'm going to, the thing about assessing the bridge, the first thing to assess is where the wires sit. The wire line has to sit in that fold. If you've seen my other videos about how to measure yourself for an underwire, you'll understand what I'm talking about. And if you haven't seen it, you might want to go and have a look at it to understand. But this wire has to sit in the natural crease between your breast tissue and your the skin of your rib cage. If it's not in the right place, if it's either too close together, so that it's away from the crease, or too far apart so your wire is actually sitting on breast tissue, you must adjust your bridge. So I know that for me the wires are too close together. I have to widen my bridge. So the easiest thing for me to do would be to take the bra off, unpick this extra seam allowance here, and then try it back on and pinch it into where I need it to be. Oh, sorry, let it out and adjust it to where it needs to be. I can't do that easily without taking the whole thing apart, but what I want you to understand is where the wires are supposed to sit, and this will govern what you need to do with your bridge. If your wires are sitting on the breast tissue, you need to bring this in. If your wires are sitting away from this natural crease, you need to let it out. You don't have to let it out evenly all the way down, because you can kind of see that this at the top here, this is fine. For me, the issue is at the bottom, and therefore I would do this in a diagonal line. You need to just kind of fiddle with this section and get it to sit where it wants to be. I'll talk you through what to do, whether you want to let it out or take it in, but what I want you to understand is what happens here. So if I was to let this out, then it's obviously going to make this longer in this section. So then I would have to go back to the back, and anything that I'd done in the back section I'd have to finalize once I've done the front. So think what you need to do. Take the bra off, make this adjustment, because all it is sewing. You don't need to do any pattern alteration at this point. Unpick this and re-sew it wherever you need it to be. Put the bra back on, reassess the band, then we'll decide what adjustments we need to make to the band. All of this hopefully will become clear when I show you the pattern pieces. So I'm pretending that I needed to make my bridge more narrow in this example. I've taken it off, I've pinned it, I've kept it the same at the top, which I'll talk about in a second, and I've taken it in a little bit at the bottom. So I would re-stitch that section there. Now sometimes the thing with needing to take a bridge in is that if your breasts are very close set, you may not be able to have enough space for two sets of underwire casing to sit side by side like this. You can overlap them, take the bridge in to the point where it's where you think it should be, and if that means that you have to overlap the channeling, you can do that. I don't have to do it, so to be absolutely honest, I don't know kind of how it feels, but I imagine that if you've got two lots of casing and two lots of wires that end up sitting on top of each other, that can be quite sort of gnarly in the middle here, and it might not be very comfortable. An alternative to doing that perhaps might be to lower the bridge, so you can kind of see that the line of the wires, they splay away from each other like that. If you don't have enough room at the top, perhaps if you come down a little bit, you might, as they start to splay away from each other, have space there. So that might be an option for you if you have very close set breasts. If you do lower the bridge, you need to sort of bear in mind the wires that you're going to put inside. So wire sizes, and I am going to be doing a video after I've done this one about different wire styles and the differences between them. But if you have a wire that's lower in the front section here, they are normally in increments of 5/8 of an inch. So if you want to lower this, see what it's like if you bring it down 5/8 of an inch, whether it ends up being lower than you want it to be, or whether it works out for you. Because if you only did 3/8 of an inch, you would end up having to cut a wire to make it that length. So if you are aware of the difference in wire lengths, then try and keep within that. It will make life a lot easier for you. But see how that goes. Maybe lower the bridge if you end up with wires that might need to cross each other. So that's taking it in, and obviously you can imagine, even though this is quite a small amount, I've taken this in now. Whatever I've taken it in will be doubled because there are two sides. So supposing that's somewhere, I don't know, supposing it was 1/4 of an inch, that would mean that I had taken out 1/2 an inch completely in this section here. So back to what I was saying just now, is that if you suddenly take this in 1/2 an inch here, it's going to affect 1/2 an inch there. Okay, so you might need to make some adjustments if you thought you had to adjust the back band. Conversely, if I let this out, I'll take these pins out and I'll let this bridge out, and I'll come back and show you what happens then, because that can be a little bit more complicated. So I'll be back in just a second. Okay, so now I have let the bridge out in here, the amount that I know that I have to do for myself. So it's about 1/2 an inch. It's quite a lot actually, I suppose, but it's 1/2 an inch each side. So I am letting my bridge out by 1 whole inch. Obviously that's going to affect the bottom edge of the bra, which I'll talk to you about in a second. But one thing that I really want to emphasize when you particularly let out a bridge, it still applies, but not generally as much when you take a bridge in. But what you need to be aware of is that now you've widened this at the center, this notch here, which if I show you on the photocopied pattern, this notch here is where the cup, the center of the bowl is, where the fullest part of the cup is, where the nipple should be in line with. So because I have added 1/2 an inch here, this will have moved round. Let me show you. So this is the notch here, and well, you can kind of see already it's not sitting directly below the nipple, which it was doing before. Logically, right, this is 1/2 an inch wider here, so of course this is all shifted around, and this is now 1/2 an inch closer to the side seam than it should be. So therefore I'm going to need to make an alteration to the cup. Now this is not going to be a fit alteration. This is simply an alteration that you may or may not need to make in order to rotate the cup so that it's in the right orientation. It will all make sense when I show you the pattern piece. But you can't adjust the bridge without checking where this notch ends up. And if it's not in the right place, you will have to do something with the cup. As I just said, we're not fitting the cup, but we have to make it sit back in the right place when we try this bra on again for the next fitting. So I'll go over that when I come to show you. It doesn't tend to apply quite so much. People tend not to need to take a bridge in as much as some other people need to let a bridge out. But I'll still show you what to do. I think obviously I've let this out here. So when I tried this on, first of all, it went round me and I made some adjustments if necessary, and it all goes round and I was happy with it. But now, of course, I've made this 1 inch longer in the bottom edge of the band. And if I spin this around, she is definitely leaning backwards, isn't she? This is looser here. I don't know if you can really see, but I can get my fingers under there easily. It's looser around the bottom edge. Now you can take it in here if you want to, but it's only the bottom edge that needs adjusting. Generally speaking, in the back band, we take everything in or let it out evenly. So I want to kind of try and avoid that. And to my mind, and this may or may not help you, but I think to myself, it's the duoplex front frame that I've adjusted in the bridge. And so it's really the duoplex section of the front frame that I want to adjust to compensate. I've let this out, and so now somewhere I have to take it in. So you can see I've made a little mark here. I've let this out by 1/2 inch, and so I want to take this in by 1/2 inch, only at the bottom edge. And so, oh, put my pen down and lost it, but I'm going to taper this in to nothing at the top. The top edge of my band is fine. So it's just this bottom edge that I need to compensate for having let the bridge out by taking in the side seam on the duoplex section only. That to me makes sense, because like I said, you normally have to do an even amount top to bottom on the power net. I don't want to have to calculate 1/2 inch, I've got 20% stretch, blah blah blah. I'm just going to take the side seam in on the duoplex section. Okay, so I hope that all makes sense. And now in the next section I'll show you how to make those pattern alterations. Well, actually how to transfer the fitting adjustments we've made on the actual band onto your pattern pieces. Now that we've marked the alterations onto the fitting band that we need to make for the bridge, I'm going to show you how to transfer that onto your paper pattern so you have a proper record of that. I had to let my bridge out, so I'll show you how to do that alteration first of all. The one thing I want to point out is when you start to make pattern alterations, you need your copy. As I say, I have a hard paper copy which I wouldn't normally use. I would use a tissue copy of my original pattern, but whichever type of paper you're using, you need to really mark in the relevant allowances on your pattern before you start to do the alterations, because the alterations that we've marked here are on the finished edges of the bra. So the elastic allowance has been turned to the inside on here, and the top allowance has been turned under. So I want to mark that on my pattern so that I know that I'm comparing like with like, for want of a better expression. The markings I've made on here on this finished version of the fitting band, I need to mark on what would be the finished version of the paper pattern, if that kind of makes any sense, which hopefully it does. So I've marked in my elastic allowance, and I've marked in the seam allowance at the side, and the edge, the top edge of the bridge, I've marked the allowance on there, so I know I'm working within the same thing that I've got for the fabric. So I'm going to show you a couple of ways of doing it, and it depends on what suits you best, what you find easiest. But first of all, I'm going to just show you by measuring the alteration. I have let my bridge out, and so I need to measure at the bottom edge here how much I've let it out by. So just pop my ruler on there, and it's just about 5/8 of an inch, or 15 millimeters. So I need to mark that onto my pattern. So this is my front band pattern piece with my 1 inch extension that we made in the sewing part of it to allow us to do bridge alterations. So from the center, original center front line, which is my dotted line here on my band, I need to come out 5/8 of an inch along the bottom edge, i.e. the elastic allowance. So I'm just going to mark that there. And for me, I am going to taper it up to the original point at the top, because I don't need to make the top edge of my bridge wider. If you feel that you do need to when you did your fitting, then obviously you would measure however much you'd let it out by at the top, pretending maybe 1/8 of an inch, and measure 1/8 of an inch away from the original line there and connect them up. So whatever you need at the bottom and whatever you need at the top, we're going to connect them with a straight line. Use a red pen so you can see it better. So from my extra 5/8 there up to the original mark at the top. That's my allowance let out that I needed. Okay, so far so good. But this line, the red line, needs to be the center of the band, so it will need to sit on the fold on the fabric. So I need to just draw in a new marking so that I remember that that needs to go on the fold, and just to make doubly sure, I'll cross that out. So that would be my new pattern piece with my new fold mark, and it would sit on the fabric like that. I need to now make this more sensible by continuing this line, because I'm clearly not going to cut out my fabric in that shape. So that's my new bottom line there. Putting back on the seam allowance, elastic allowance that I'd kind of taken off, and carry that down. All right, and then that's going to all come off. Like that. That's my new bridge part there. But as I said in the fitting, I need to compensate for this extra width at the bridge by taking the similar amount off at the side seam. That's how I decided I was going to do this. I find it just easier. The duoplex part has been let out, and so the duoplex part needs to be let in. That's the logic that works for me. So similarly over here, along the finished edge, what would be the finished edge, I'm going to come out from the side seam 5/8 of an inch, just the same as I came out there, or come in I should say, and just connect it to the top. Like that. And tapering it slightly because I also have 3/8 of an inch elastic allowance at the top there. So that needs to go, except that this is a seam, it's not on the fold, and so from my red line I want to add back my 1/4 inch seam allowance before this can become my pattern piece. Okay, is that making sense? I'm working within the seam allowances when I'm doing the alterations, but I need to add back the seam allowances when I've finished to make it back into a pattern piece. So now I'm going to trim that off. Whoops, trying not to cut through my ruler. Okay, and that then is my front frame piece for the time being. We're going to have to make another alteration that I'll show you in a minute to do with the rotation of the cups, but that's my new front band pattern piece, and I would mark this up as being version 2, and depending on how organized or how many other alterations you think you might have to do, I sometimes write on here what I did. I moved this in 5/8 of an inch, I moved that out 5/8 of an inch. Okay, so kind of don't be shy about writing on your pattern pieces. You need to, unless you prefer to have a notebook where you write things in, I just like to grab a pattern piece and try and see what I did with it. So I write as much information as I feel I need onto the pattern piece itself. But whatever you do, make a record. Whatever method you use, do please make a record of what you did at each stage, because it will make life a lot easier going forward. Okay, so that's my new version 2 pattern piece, my front frame, having let out the bridge and taken in the side to compensate. Another method of marking your required pattern alterations, if you don't like measuring and you're more of a hands-on kind of a person, is to mark it with using a pin. So you'll need something that you can stick pins into. So a piece of Amazon delivery boxes are excellent for this kind of thing. A piece of corrugated card, or this, for example, is some craft foam board from Hobbycraft. Just something you can stick pins into. And I've got my pattern piece that's all marked up with my seam allowances and everything underneath, and put your fitting band that you've marked up with your required alterations on the top of it and line up the required bit. So I'm lining up the center here. I've lining up my finished edge, so I've got the 1/4 inch here of my pattern showing proud, and pin this onto your pattern, matching up the outer lines. And then a quick visual check that everything's still lined up. Secure this, try not to stick it through the underwire, stick your pin through the underwire, it doesn't do it any good at all. And then at the bottom, because I've marked in my seam allowance, my elastic allowance rather, I can be relatively confident that I've got that in the right place. So secure your fitting band to the cardboard with your pattern underneath, and then with another pin you can use a if you've got a sharp pointy tracing wheel, you can use that, but whatever you need, some method to just make little holes along the line of your new bridge that you want. Okay, so which I've marked here in a solid red line. So carry on through, and then take out a couple of pins and just check that you can see a line of holes, which I can. So I'm going to take that away, and you no doubt can't see the holes on the camera, so I'm going to just mark with a pen my little holes that I made. Like that. And then I whip that away, and hopefully now you can see where I stuck my pins. I've now got a series of little red dots that I can just connect. Now it's fabric and it moves about a little bit, so it may not be a dead straight line, but you know that it needs to be a straight line because this has to go on the fold of your fabric, so you know it needs to be straight. So line up the bottom one, line up the top one, and connect them like that. So I went a little bit wonky, but essentially, as long as you know you've got the bottom and the top marked, it needs to be a straight line, so that's what you join up. And then, so this is just an alternative method if you don't like measuring and so on and so forth. So having got this far, then you would then continue in the way that I showed you in the section before, assuming that you had done measurements instead of this stabbing method. Okay. If you found from your fitting that you need to take the bridge section in, I'm going to show you how to do that now. I have marked in green here on my fabric. This is going to be my new line. So my little red dotted line, if I fold this back out of the way, that was the original pattern piece without the front extension. The green line here is where I want to take my bridge in to, just like that. So there are a couple of ways of doing this. You can either do it straightforwardly by measurement, or you could do it by the stab method. So I'll show you first of all how I would do it by the stab method, by which I mean you need something that you can stab pins into. So a piece of cardboard, like a Amazon delivery box, I'm sure we've got lots of those lurking at home, something you can stab it into, or else you can use something like this, which is craft foam board from Hobbycraft, this particular one is, but just something that you can easily stick pins into. And so I'm going to pop that underneath with my pattern on the top, and then my fitting band with my markings on it. So pin this all down first of all, align everything up. So I have got my ounces marked on the pattern as I was explaining before. Pop that in, line everything up as best you can. It is tricky. You can, if you want to, if you might find it easy to take the wires out when you're doing this, but I didn't think of it, so they're left in at the minute. But pop that in, and because I've marked my elastic allowance here, I know where the elastic's going to sit on top of my pattern. Smooth it out, pop an extra pin in there if you want to, and smooth it out and pin it. Easier said than done through all of that, but like that. So you've got it all pinned down and your pattern is sandwiched between the cardboard and the fabric. So now I'm just going to take a pin, or you can use a spiky tracing wheel if you have one of those. It needs to be quite a spiky one though to get through everything. And then I'm going to use a pin to stab along my new center front line. Like that, just maybe 1/4 of an inch apart. I'm blending it into the original line here, but if you need to take it in more, or if you've lowered your bridge to compensate, or whatever you need to do, mark those on here as well. When I've got that, I can take all these pins away. Whoopsie daisy. And take my pattern away. You probably can't see, but I'll mark it in green. All the little pinholes are now marked on here, and where it blends into there. So hopefully you can see okay the little green marks that I've got, and then I would connect them up. If it goes a little bit wonky, which it kind of does, because you've got it's sort of slightly organic using fabric and you've got pins in the way, wires in the way, but what you need to do is to make sure that the bottom and the top marks are connected in a straight line, even if they look as if they go a bit wonky. The important thing is that this has to be a straight line, because it's going to end up on the fold of your fabric, so it must be straight. As long as the bottom's in the right place and the top is in the right place, you can just go ahead and connect those up together. The other way to make the pattern alterations is by measurement. So I have got my new line that I need marked in green, and as I was just showing you, that was my original pattern line there along those little red dots. So at the bottom edge, I need to measure how much I'm coming in by. So this is 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to mark in 1/4 of an inch from the original fold line of the pattern before I added my 1 inch extension to make the fitting band. So mark in 1/4 of an inch at the bottom edge of the bra, which is the top edge of the elastic allowance. And then if you needed to take it in at the top as well, you'd need to mark where you're taking it into, or if you're just blending into the original line, whatever you're doing, connect those 2 points up with your ruler and whoopsie, mark it in with a straight line. Okay, like that in green. So that's going to be my new center front line on the fold. So I'm going to cross out the original markings and draw myself in some new markings, which is all going to get a bit confusing to look at straight off, but we are going to retrace this into a new pattern piece when it's all done. So that is now my new center front on the fold section there. So I can just cut off the excess bit because I'm fairly happy that that's okay now. So I'm going to chop that away like that, and that piece is no use. So that's my new centre front line, having taken 1/4 of an inch in. But I've taken 1/4 of an inch in here. I need to compensate at the side seam. 1/4 of an inch is, well, it's not really very much. It's neither here nor there, but I think if you're going to go to the trouble of doing pattern alterations, you may as well do a thorough job of it all. So for me, if I have come in 1/4 of an inch this side, I need to come out 1/4 of an inch at the side seam in order for this entire section to be the length that I wanted it to be. Yep. So I need to add to my pattern piece here. So I'm just going to slide some paper underneath. You'd obviously add tissue or whatever medium you're using for your pattern. Sounds very posh, doesn't it? But whatever paper you're using, stick a piece on the side, and then I just need to come out 1/4 of an inch at the point of the top edge of the elastic allowance. Don't forget, we're always working within the finished lines, for want of a better expression. So at the top of the elastic allowance, I've come out 1/4 of an inch, and I need to just blend this up to the original spot at the top, like that. I can just cut it rather than multitask here. There we go. Chop that off. Chop that off. I don't need that. And then I just need to carry on the bottom edge here, like that. Okay. And then mark in my new stitching line, just so that I know that I've done all of the steps that I needed to do. So mark in my new stitching line. Okay, so that's my bridge taken in and the side seam let out by the same amount, so that the overall length of this piece is what I needed it to be. Then I would write on here what this is. So this is version 2 of this pattern piece, and then you can either, if you like to keep a notebook or whatever you like to do, but I like to write on my pattern pieces that I've taken this in by 1/4 of an inch and I have let this out by 1/4 of an inch. Okay, then I know at a glance what I did. But as I say, whether you prefer to keep things in a notebook, then that's fine, but just please do try and get into the habit of making a note of the things that you did at each step of a fitting, because it's way easier. If you need to backtrack, if you can sort of think, oh, actually version 2 is better, I've now done version 3, you can go back to see what you've written on your pattern piece. Whatever you want to do, I can't stress enough, do keep a note of what you're doing. If your band was too loose when you did your fitting, you will need to take the back band section in. So it's a fairly straightforward alteration, but there are certain things that you need to bear in mind. Quite often, if you're trying on normal clothes that you're making for yourself, if something's too loose, too wide, you usually pinch it in at the side seam, for example. But you can't do that on this pattern piece because it's shaped. The bottom edge particularly is shaped. If I, as soon as I start to make this chop bits off this edge here, you can see that it's, because it's shaped, it becomes narrower here. So if I were to just suddenly chop this off here, then it's not the same length. This seam has to remain the same length because it's being sewn to the front band section. So just chopping something off at the side seam is not the way to do it. Equally, it's no good chopping a piece off of this section either to make it less wide, because this is the hook and eye section and this section was fine. It's the main body of the pattern that needs to be taken in. So I usually look on a pattern piece for the least shaped section, which is usually somewhere in the middle here. So I'm going to just kind of plump roughly for the middle, and what I need to do is to draw a line that's perpendicular, let me put it in between my two words, perpendicular to the dog's line. Okay, it's important that you make widthwise adjustments according to the dog's line. If it's a crooked line, when you've done it all and taken it in, the back band won't sit properly, the power net won't be quite right. So just draw a line roughly in the middle at right angles to the dog's line, and then however much you decided you needed to take your band in by when you did the fitting, so for example, let's say 1 centimetre, I'm going to just draw another line 1 centimetre away from my first line, and I've quoted metric measurements and I'm using an imperial ruler, but anyway, 3/8 of an inch is the same as a centimetre, so that's what that is there. So I need to close it up by that amount. So I find it easiest to cut along one of these lines. It really doesn't matter which one you cut along. And then I'm going to just slide one piece on top of the other, making sure that I keep my dog's line straight. So it's easiest to quickly pop a ruler on there. I think that's nice and straight. And then I just need to stick those two pieces together. There and there. And then I'm going to quickly write on here that this is version 2 of this pattern and that I have taken it in by 3/8 of an inch. That's how I annotate it for myself, just so that I know what I've done. Next time I come to look at this pattern piece, I'll know what it is. And of course, as I've said, I'm doing these alterations on regular paper, but I would use tissue paper and trace it off again, and that will become my version 2 already there. Now sometimes, and it doesn't really show up too much on this piece, it's not too shaped along the bottom edge, but because I have made sure that my dog's line stays where it is, sometimes you get a little jump at the top or a little jump at the bottom. You can perhaps see a tiny jump there, and all I would do is to then blend it away. I should have made a much bigger alteration and you'd be able to see what I mean. But if there's any kind of jump, then you just blend it top and bottom so that you have a nice smooth curve at the bottom if it's curvy, and a nice straight line at the top. And really that's kind of all there is to it. So the trick is to always do an alteration, a widthwise alteration, somewhere in the main body of your pattern piece. Don't take it off either side because it doesn't work. Now I'm going to let this piece of pattern, the back band, out. So you will have in your fitting, you will have established by how much, or at least taken the best guess that you can, by how much you want to widen your back band because it's too tight. So for the purposes of this demonstration, because it's easier for my head to work out the maths in a minute, I'm going to say that I want to let my band out by 1 centimetre. This is going to result in a 2 centimetre overall increase in the length of the bra band, because we're going to have 2 back band pieces. I've chosen 1 centimetre because it's easier for me to work out, and it will be a lot easier for you probably to do this calculation, this measurement, if you're using a metric system. You'll see why in a second. So I'm going to pick a spot in the back band piece that's relatively without shaping. So not this section and not the side seam, but somewhere in the middle. I need a line that's perpendicular to the dog's line. There. So it has to be perpendicular. This has to be a right angle, otherwise it distorts the band when the bra is made up. I need 1 centimetre, so that's 10 millimetres. Do you remember I said at the beginning that the power net has a 30% stretch, but I like to use a 20% in my calculation so that the back band isn't stretched to its absolute limit. So if I let this out by 10 centimeters, really allowing for the extra bit of stretch, I've kind of done a centimeter plus 20% because that's how much the power net will stretch by. If I don't want it to be that much bigger, I need to take 20% off my 1 centimeter or my 10 mil. I hope you're following me and I'm making some sense. I'm not brilliant at maths, but 20% of 10 leaves you with 80%. Yes, if I take 20% off 100%, then I'm left with 80%. So I need 80% of 10 millimeters, which is 8 millimeters. You can see now why I chose that as my figure to work with, because it's easy in my head. So for a 1 centimeter expansion, I'm actually only going to put in 8 millimeters. And obviously you'd need to work in whatever your actual measurement was, or you can just ignore it and just do it anyway. But technically, if you were drafting a bra, this is what you would do. You would allow for the fact that the power net is going to stretch. So I am going to open this up by 8 millimeters altogether. And to do that, I'm going to bring in my piece of tissue and draw 2 lines 8 millimeters apart. There. I'm just going to sort out where 8 millimeters comes, which is there. Making sure it's going to be parallel like that. Okay, so that is now an 8 millimeter gap, which will work out to be 1 whole centimeter, allowing for the stretch. So that's the width of the gap, and I need to have a guideline for where I'm going to match my dogs up to. So I've got a kind of really long thin H, not the chap from Steps, but a drawing on a piece of paper. Okay, that's my expansion piece. I'm now going to cut the back band pattern piece along the line that I drew. Bring my super H in, and I'm going to put one piece lined up along here and along the dog's line and tape it like that. And then bring in my second piece, pop my ruler in here to make sure everything's properly lined up. There. Bring my second piece in, oopsie daisy, there we go, like that, and make sure that it's matching along the line so that it's widened by the right amount and then is lined up with the dogs. Okay, like that. Slightly wonky, but you do it slightly more neatly probably. Scrub some more tape. Top and bottom. And there I've done my 1 centimeter width adjustment, allowing for the stretch of the power net in there. But of course we've got a bit of a jump happening now, which we don't want. So going to connect up this spot that hasn't changed to this spot that hasn't changed, and that's going to be my new top line. It's not fantastically clear with the friction pen, I must admit, but this is why I like to use the invisible type tape, because you can mark over the top of it as opposed to the shiny stuff. And then at the bottom the same, I'm coming in from here and I want it to line up over there. Like that, so that my bottom line is smooth, my top line is smooth. and that's the pattern. Then I would trace it off onto a new tissue pattern piece, and that's my lengthened back band piece. Okay, so that's the first fitting done, and we've made the horizontal adjustments to the pattern so that now the band goes around nicely, it's comfortable, you've got the right amount of tension in the back band, you've decided where you want the hooks and eyes to do up, and you've made everything work like that. The back elastic is nice and smooth as it should be, and we're ready to move on to the next phase of the fitting, which is going to be looking at the vertical fitting of the band. But I realized as I put this back onto Norma that it is quite a good illustration at this point of what I was saying at the beginning. When I first put the bra on her, because I put the bra back extender in to demonstrate to you what a band that was too loose would look like, I commented then that the first thing I really wanted to do was to start working on the cups because they looked awful. As I put this back on, I thought, it struck me that actually the cups don't look at all bad now, but I haven't done anything to the cups. So all I've done was to make the adjustment so that the band now fits around properly, and that has automatically sorted out quite a few of the wrinkles and so on that were evident in the cup when I first put this on. So I can't bang on, or I will bang on, but I feel I can't emphasize too much the fact that you do need to concentrate on one area at a time. You do need to get the band to fit properly before you can start thinking about the cups, because the fit of the band really does affect the fit of the cups. So now we're going to look at the depth of the pattern, as I said, the bra. You can see at the side here that it's wrinkling here, and this is truly what it does on me. All of my bras do this. It's not just because it's not on a real person. So it wrinkles here because it's too deep. Where I kind of, the shape of me where I sort of go in is higher, if you like, than the bra was expecting it to be, but for want of a better expression. Because although if any of you that have met me or seen me, I am quite tall. I'm 5'11", but my torso, my shoulder to waist measurement is just standard, the same as anyone else. My height comes from my leg length, so my body is fairly sort of standard length. I'm not particularly long or short in the body, but this always happens with my bras. So the first thing we're going to look at is this. It is quite a common issue. So if I spin her around, it's quite simple to see. It's immediate. As I was saying in my introduction, even though you've done measurements, it doesn't always identify shape or exactly where those measurements come from. So I measured around under my breasts all the way around in a straight line, and I got the measurement that I wanted, and that's fine, but it doesn't take into account the depth of it. So this is all wrinkling here anyway, the long and the short of it is. So it's easy with wonder clips to just clip out the excess fabric, however far round it wants to kind of lie, and it's obviously showing you everywhere that there's too much fabric in that section. I'm trying to hold her up and pin her at the same time, which is failing abysmally. There we go. So it's sort of there and it's tapering away to nothing. So I'm just putting clips in there and just assessing how far round this excess fabric comes, and I think that's about right. Once I clip those out, you can sort of see that it's nice and smooth compared to the other side where it's all still crinkled up. Okay, now if I was to wear this bra like this, where it's all crinkled during the course of the day, it would be very uncomfortable, and so that needs to be adjusted. Okay, so that's fine. That's the bottom edge. Now we'll have a look along the top edge of the bra, which we haven't really looked at up until now. So I want to know if this comes up high enough, or indeed is too high at the side seam. This sort of does come into the cup fitting, as well, you want to make sure that this top line is fully encompassing all your breast tissue. You don't want any bulgy bits out here, or if you have kind of got excess fluff going on in this area, which I do have a bit, you might want your bra to come up high enough to cover it, or maybe drop down a little bit, not to make a roll. This is your decision. This is your bra and how you want it to fit. But the one thing I would say, that the wire line and the top line needs to include your breast tissue, otherwise it's not giving you enough support and it is unsightly. So let's look at the top line. There is a bit of space in here, and so I could dart this a little bit to make this top line a little bit more snug. So that would also be a simple thing. Pinch out the excess and pop in a wonder clip so you can wait for it to be comfortable. In real life I would have caught my skin in there, look. Anyway, so that's that, and it needs, as I say, needs to come up high enough. I'll show you what to do if it's too high and what to do if you want to lower it a little bit, but you do need to bear in mind with everything that it has to have the wire in here, and the wire has to have a certain amount of wriggle room. So if you've got your tester band on and the wire is sticking up here, either you'd need to consider try out the same size wire but a different style, i.e. if you have a long wire in here, you might want to try a regular wire instead. Generally speaking though, different wire styles more or less come up to the same sort of height in here. I'll talk more about that in my next video and when I'm doing the alteration. But here my wire stops there, which is quite a bit lower. As a general rule, I hesitate to use the word rule, but it is really, you need to have some wriggle room at the top here, and generally speaking you want to have at least a ½ inch between the top of your wire, which hopefully you can see there, and the top of your bra. If your wire is rammed, I can't really demonstrate, but if your wire comes right up to here and is really kind of rammed in so that you can barely do your bar tag to close your channeling, it's going to just rub all the time. It won't be comfortable. I don't know if you've ever worn a bra that squeaks as you move. It's because it's rammed in too tightly. It needs to be able to flex and move as you move, and it needs to have some clearance in the top so that it's not permanently rammed up there, because although the wires, certainly that I sell, have lovely rounded tips to them, they can still want to eventually wear away and poke through the fabric. If you've had a ready-to-wear bra where the wires come out, that's usually because they've had to cut them to be the right length and haven't finished the ends off properly, so they're like little knives inside, but also quite often because they come up too high, and so that they're just pushing all the time as you're moving around during the day. So that's one thing to check. I would tend to use a longer wire in here to come up just a touch higher. If the wire stops too short, then this edge is not held in and it will just kind of be loose and flappy, and you don't want that. And also you end up with a dent showing here, probably through your clothes. So you want the wire a touch longer than this one, but not so long that it's really rammed at the top. And the same thing applies at the center. So actually I could wiggle this wire around a bit more. At the center you want also maybe 1 centimeter, 3/8 of an inch clearance between the top of your wire and where you close the channeling, for exactly the same reason, so it can move. So actually if I push that down a little bit to where it should be at the center front, it makes it be much more happy at the side. So actually this wire is a good length for this bra. So that's what you would decide. Does it come up too high? It's especially a thing in the summer, or if you're going on holiday or you're going to be wearing a sleeveless top. Nobody likes their bra to show up here, so that might be a consideration if you're making a bra for the summer. Just sort of check where your sleeves, your armholes are in the clothes that you like to wear, and make sure your bra doesn't show, and you can make an alteration for that. So that's okay. I've tweaked it out of here. Now, sorry, just quickly going back. You might think that if you're too much here, but you think that you need to extend it here, you don't need to do anything. But you kind of do. Even if you take out ½ inch here and want to add ½ inch there, they're two separate parts of the bra. Yes, they're connected by a seam, but they're not sitting in the same part of your body. So you can't take this excess fabric and make it shift up there, because it's all shaped and it's all connected. So sometimes it feels like you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, but if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do, because what you're aiming for is to get the right shape. Your bra, your fitting band needs to match your body and be comfortable. So that's what we're going to do there. So let me see. The other thing to check or think about is the hook and eye. Now, in the largest size patterns, they are drafted for a 3-row or 3-deep hook and eye. Some people, it's because if you're fuller busted, you kind of want as much support in your band as you can get, and therefore the extra width that the 3-row gives you is helpful, but not everybody likes that. If you want to only have a 2-row hook and eye, I'll show you how to make an alteration for that as well, so that we need to take some out of the top there. Then the other thing to think of is in this section here. Now, personally, I have extra fluff going on in this section, and quite often when a bra band is straight across there, it gives me a bulge that I don't particularly like showing through my clothes. The answer to that is to do a back strap extension, it's called, whereby we'll redraft the power net section to come up higher before it connects to the strap. So you have an extra bit of power net going on in this section here that helps to smooth it out. I find that really comfortable and much more flattering under clothes, so I'll show you how to do that as well. Then the last thing that we're going to check for is whether or not you might need to do what's known as a downward hike. I do need to do it, so I can, and it does show up on here quite nicely. What I mean by that is that the whole of the bottom line of your bra should be in a straight line, but you can see, I think, that if I straighten this up, I have a space where the hook and eye is, where it rides up a little bit. Okay, so this is distinct from if the whole of the back band rides up. As I said back at the beginning in the first fitting, if from the side seams all the way across your bra is sitting way up here and your breasts are hanging down at the front, it's because your band is too loose. But if you've done the fitting, the first fitting, and you know that your band, or you're confident that your band is the right length, but still this is happening to you, it's just to do with the shape of your body. It's not really to do with the fit or the length of the band. So what I kind of really need is for the hook and eye section to dip down by maybe about ½ inch, looking at this, just in the center, so that this forms a continuous nice straight line and doesn't ride up just in the middle there. So I'll also show you how to do that, if you need it to be done, of course. So I think that will then be all we need to do for the depth. But there's one last thing that's really, really important, that if you've had to make any adjustments to your bridge width in your first fitting, you really now need to check the position of your cups. So what has happened on here is that I have made this wider by 5/8 of an inch or 15 millimeters, and so it's kind of moved the band around this way. This blue notch is supposed to sit directly underneath the nipple, but I've made this wider here, so now this blue notch is not sitting where it should be sitting. I don't know how closely you can see, but in the structure of this display model, this seam here would sit underneath my nipple, and you can see that this marker, this notch, is not sitting there anymore, because I've added, probably at the level of this notch roughly here, I've added probably something like 1/2 inch in here. So this is now more or less 1/2 inch too far out to the side. Okay, it makes sense when you sort of think about it, but it is something that for a long time lots of people have kind of been saying, well, when I make my bridge wider, then the cups don't fit properly. And this is why, because now this seam should line up with that notch, and this seam should run down from the nipple straight down. You can see if I turn this sideways, well, maybe that doesn't help because it doesn't, but it now splays out to the side. Anyway, perhaps you can see more easily, sort of full on. Instead of these seams coming straight down, they're now going slightly out to the side, and that means that this cup is rotated slightly to the side. Because I know, because this is what the adjustment I need to make. The effect that it has, if you don't make an allowance or make an adjustment for this and re-rotate your cup, is quite often in this section it is flat. You kind of end up with the breast being flattened along there, and you kind of think, well, perhaps it's because the top line is too short and I need to widen it and so on. I know, because I've done all these things. You think that's going to help, but it doesn't help. It's because the breast is being dragged around to the side more than it should be, and so the fullness in this section of the cup is not here, but now it's here, and it flattens this top edge. If none of this makes any sense to you and you think, what on earth is she on about, then obviously I would imagine that you don't need this alteration. But if what I've just said makes you think, oh my goodness, that's exactly what happens to my bras, then this is the answer. If you've widened your bridge, you need to relocate your cup. So I think I mentioned this at the beginning, we will need to make an adjustment to the cup. It's not a fitting adjustment. It's just to make the cup sit properly in the cradle for the final fitting that we're going to do. It's not a fitting adjustment to the cup. It's just a positioning instruction, if you like. Not instruction, alteration. So with a different coloured pen to the one that I used to mark this notch in the first place, I'm going to mark where it needs to come. So you can kind of do it by eye, but also by maths, because if I've widened it 1/2 inch here, then I need to move it 1/2 inch back towards the centre front there. Okay, then I'll show you the effect that has and what we need to do with the cup later on. If you've taken your bridge in, you would also need to check. Generally speaking, most people don't take a bridge in by the same amount that lots of us have to let our bridge out, and therefore it's not such an enormous difference. But if you do anything here and it does change the position of the wire line, you must check that your notch is still lined up directly underneath your nipple. I probably have stressed it too much, but I feel I can't stress this enough, because it took me a long time to work out for myself that was what was going on, and that was why, however much everything seemed to work, be the right sort of size and all the rest of it, and the right volume in the cups, it never looked right. And then I worked out why. So I'm hopefully passing that on to you now to save you a lot of trouble. Okay, so I'll show you how to mark those alterations up and do them in just a second. Then after we've done all of that, the last thing we're going to look at is the straps and the positioning for that. So there's quite a few little bits and pieces I can show you. So don't forget that I have bookmarked the video with timestamps. So if you don't need a lot of what I'm going to go through now with you, you can just leap ahead on to the next section that is relevant. Okay, let's get cracking with these things. Righty-ho, so I have put my clips in and then very carefully taken this off Norma so that the clips didn't fall off. I realise that might not be quite such an easy thing if you're doing the fitting on yourself. So if you are worried that the clips might fall off, then try and mark the positioning that I'm about to show you before you take it off yourself. If the clips do fall out before you get a chance to make the proper adjustments, you can always just pop it back on again, pop the bar back on and try it again. But what we need to do is take the marker pen, a friction pen again I'm using, or if you're using a washable marker pen, whatever you're going to use, something that comes off easily anyway. And so I'm just going to, where I've clipped it, I've just marked where the teeth of the wonder clips come. You can see just there, and I've done the same here, and I've done the same here. And then I needed to dart the side seam, so I've also marked it there. Now I know this is going to be a dart. It's going to taper away to nothing at the bottom, so all I need to do is to make sure I know how wide I need my little dart to be at the top edge. So I can take all those clips away. I realised as I was thinking all this through, that having mentioned to you that if you have extra fluff behind your arm in the back there, you can do what's called a back strap extension. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this phase of the fitting, because in phase 3 we're going to look at the straps and a couple of other little bits and pieces, and that may necessitate making more adjustments to the back band piece. So if we've done the back strap extension on this piece at this stage, it will all have to be redone if we need to do anything else further on. So I'm going to show the back strap extension as part of the third fitting, if you're wondering where that's got to. Okay, so this is it all marked up on the bra. So now we need to bring the pattern pieces in. So I've got my version 2 front frame pattern piece that includes the extension that I did on the bridge and so on. So there's no point going back to the first pattern. We need to build up all the alterations that we're doing as we go. But I've got it marked up as version 2, as you can see, so that I know where I am. Now, I've taken a pinch out of this section all the way through, and ordinarily, through to the back rather, and ordinarily you would think that that's going to sort of be like a dart. Obviously it won't be a dart, you can't sew a dart into a bra, that would be really uncomfortable. And although I've pinched it out here, what I'm going to do is to take the excess away at the bottom, because after all it's the bottom band that needs to be shaped, not a chunk taken out of the centre. So the first thing to do is, this is my side seam here, so I'm going to measure at the side seam how much I pinched out using my wonder clips. So I just get this measure, and just here at the side seam it is 3/4 of an inch. I don't know if you can see that, but it's 3/4 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is to come up using the top edge of the elastic allowance. Remember I told you to, or suggested rather, that you mark your elastic allowance in. So from the top edge of here I'm going to come up 3/4 of an inch here. Okay, so this distance is that distance. Then I just need to see how much I've pinched it out here. So here it is just about 1/2 inch, and then I want to check how far in from the side seam this mark is, and it's 2 inches. So 2 inches in from the stitching line at the side seam, I'm going to put a little mark in that area, and in that area I now know I need to come up by 1/2 inch, which is this bit here. Okay, so I've got this mark and I've got this mark. That's how much fabric needs to come out in this area. I now need to shape this. So currently the bottom line of this bra is dead straight, but by the time I've done this alteration it's going to end up being curved, because That's the shape I need it to be on my body for it to look as if it's in a straight line. So I'm going to just do a straight line lightly, so I've got a guide, and what I want is for this to curve up. Now in this section directly underneath the cup positioning, I can't have that get thinner because at this stage anyway, because I'm going to sort of run out of room. So what I want, and I can't have this be an angle, so what I'm wanting to do is to join this with a curve. If you're not good at freehand curves, then by all means use a French curve to get this shape looking pleasant for you to your eye. Take a few stabs at it until you get it looking how you want it to look, or just use a curve and get it right straight first time. Okay, that looks sort of okay-ish. I'll fiddle about with it a little bit more, but you don't really need to watch me drawing and rubbing stuff out. Okay, so that's quite a pleasant line to my eye for what I need it to be. So I have this coming up here and quite smooth along there. This is above the elastic allowance, so I need to put my elastic allowance back. All right, let me draw this in a different color. That's my finished line there. And to make this back into a proper pattern, I need to add my elastic allowance back. So follow that. Until you've got back to nothing, which is kind of there. So copy that curve that you did there, and this is going to go away. So now this side seam is the right length for when I tried the bra on and pinched out the excess fabric. Okay, you can go back, re-pinch this and offer it back up just to make sure. But that's what we need to do with that. Okay, so that's fine. But this piece joins onto that piece. So now we need to get the back band pattern piece in so that we can carry on this shaping onto the next piece. I just haven't marked my seam allowance. Let me just mark my seam allowance in here. And my elastic allowance. I deliberately didn't do it so you can watch me. Ha ha. There we go. Okay, so these two pieces get stitched together. We can't stitch the paper together. And so what I'm going to do is to overlap them on the seam allowance lines. Not like that, and not like that, but like that. Okay, so you can see those are my seam lines and the top there. I'm going to just sit one on top of the other and put a little piece of tape just to hold them steady. All right, so you've in effect I've stitched these two pieces together at the side seam. So the same process. Obviously it's going to be the same level here because that's the side seam, and then I've tapered away on this piece to 1/4 inch at that stage, which again I'm going to measure in as 4 inches in. So 4 inches in from my seam line. I'm going to put a little mark, and I know that at that point I need to be 1/4 inch above. All right, so I've replicated the creases that I could see in the fabric on my body and the positioning onto my paper pattern. And I know then I have to taper this away to nothing at this point. So that's the last marking I need. And the same the same thing, the bottom edge of the back band is more or less straight, so you can pop in a ruler again as your guide and blend this into a softer curve. Doesn't need much blending, to be honest, but like that. Because all the time you have to bear in mind that you're going to be stitching elastic along this line, so you want it to be a smooth curve. Okay, so the same process now. I'm going to go back and add my 3/4 of an inch, or whatever elastic allowance you've got on your pattern, obviously, in there. Join them up. Blending it here at the side seam. And that also is going to go. So now the very straight edge that I had is now quite a curvy edge, but hey ho, that's what it needs to be for my body. So don't get hung up on the idea that the original band was this shape at the bottom and now it's all very curvy, because that's the weird thing is with 3D objects, is that usually a curved line on a curved surface ends up looking straight. Anyway, I'm sure you'll understand what I mean when you put it on yourself. So that's how it wants to be. I'm just going to separate these two pattern pieces now, because what I want to say to you is that at the seam line, this sort of needs to be at a right angle on your pattern piece, so that your seam allowance is straight. Otherwise, if you keep covering that up, when you sew it and turn the seam allowance to the inside, it will come up short. It won't all be level at the bottom. And the same with this piece. Make sure that in the seam allowance that's square on. Okay, so I can now just tuck that piece of sellotape out of the way. I can now cut this off. And the same here. And that's my new bottom edge. Look, there it isn't. That's ugly. There we go. That's my new bottom edge that mimics what we did here when we took that excess fabric out. If you need to make a side dart in your band, because it was gapping a little bit along the top edge, this is how we're going to do it. I already marked it before in the second fitting, so you can see at the top here these two little marks. This is how wide my dart is going to be. So let me move that out of the way and grab these two pieces. We need to do it on the front frame and the back band piece. We want the dart to come out sort of equally on either side there, and so I need to measure how wide my dart needs to be. So altogether between the two red marks here, it measures a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to take 1/4 inch from each of these two pieces to make up my whole 1/2 inch. And so it just so happens, of course, that 1/4 inch is the seam allowance. So I could simply mark here and here. Let me do it in red, so you can see easier. Mark there and there. That's the width of my dart that I want to take. And I'm going to simply then draw a line, blending it away just about at the top of the elastic allowance there. Obviously you want to end up with a smooth line altogether, but that works out quite well like that. So that's one side of the dart, and then do the same thing on the other pattern piece. at this point, before you get too carried away, remember to remark your notch there so that you don't lose that when you cut it off, because all we need to do now is to just cut off this little wedge shaped piece that we don't need, like that and like that. Whoopsie daisy. Ooh. Try and keep control of your pattern pieces and so on when you're working on them. There we go. So that's probably one of the most straightforward alterations to make, is just to simply measure how wide, whoopsie, I've lost it, it's gone inside out. There we are. Measure how wide you want your dart to be overall. Divide that amount in two and then take it away from each piece of the pattern here. If you noticed when you were doing your fitting that the, oh my word, I'm getting myself tied up all in a knot. Here we go. Yes, I was right the first time. That's the trouble with making it partially inside out. I can never quite tell where I am. If you noticed that the gapping was happening more in this area or in that area and wasn't evenly kind of distributed along the side seam, well then you could take out the dart wherever you need it to be. That's the beauty of doing a proper fitting, is that you can see instantly where the gapping's occurring, but in most cases it is evenly front to back. Yeah, so that's just how to remove some excess along the top edge of your fitting band, and not to do anything along the bottom edge, just to take it out where you need it to be. For this alteration, I'm going to imagine that I need to raise the top band, the top line rather of the band on this pattern, because it doesn't come up high enough under my arm, or because I need to accommodate a longer wire, whatever it is. I need, for this part of it, I'm going to work on the band, because obviously we're doing the fitting band. But if you have to make this particular alteration, you will need to carry it on when you do a cup fitting. But I'll talk about that when we talk about fitting cups. But do bear in mind that if you make this alteration, do make sure you've made a note of it, so that when you come to carry on fitting the cups part of your bra, that you know you've got to do something to them. Okay, so because I need to make this longer, I'm going to just stick some paper onto each piece here. Just quickly, and I can actually rip that piece off there and shove it onto here. That's a technical term, by the way. Shove that on there. Okay, there we go. So I want to come up, let me see, what should we say, what's a reasonable amount? Well, pretending I wanted to use a different wire length, say I'm going to come up 5/8 of an inch. You may not need to come up that much, it is really quite a lot, but at least it shows you what I need to do. So this is my wire line here. Draw that out of the way and cut that in a second, and put my seam allowance in and extend it past the top of the band, because I know that's where I'm going to go. I'll chop that off so it's not a distraction. There. Alright, so that's stuck on there. This piece has got its bit stuck on there, and so I will again mark in my seam allowance to extend it past the top there. Okay, what I need to do now is to join these two pieces together as if they were stitched. So I need to overlap the stitching lines. So I always mark sewing lines as a dotted line. I think it's a throwback to many years ago when I started learning to sew, and patterns, commercial patterns, came in individual sizes, and all of the seam lines and the stitching lines and everything else was marked on there for you. So that was always marked with a dotted line anyway. So I am going to raise this up, but I don't want it to be any higher in the back. So I'm going to sort of taper it down to nothing by the time I get to the strap scoop in the back band. And so I'm going to just connect those up like that. Okay, so I can't just raise it at the wire line and then come back to, well I could, but it's not a good idea to just come back to nothing at the side seam, i.e. you're only altering this piece, because then you'll have a weird angle. And as we all know, elastics don't like doing weird angles, they like to be nice and smooth. So I'm going to make that there. Now while they're still joined together, I'm going to cut them. Along that line, because then I know that I've got them exactly the right length at the stitching line there. Pop that apart and either take that tape off or curl it out the way, and then I've added to my wire line and brought the top line of the bra up a little bit under my arms, if that's what you need to do. Then the last thing to do is to carry on that shaping for the wire line there, so it's nice and smooth. Okay, so that's how to bring the top band up higher under your arms. If you decided when you did your second fitting that the bra comes up too high under your arms, either because it's uncomfortable or because you want to make a bra to wear underneath a certain item of clothing that might have a lower sleeveless armhole kind of design, you need to bring the top line down. But it's not something that you can do in isolation at this stage just on the fitting band, because it involves the cup the same as it does actually if you were making it this longer, but it is more of an effect if you need to make it shorter. You really have to bear in mind the wire line. You can't come down too far, and equally you can't go up too high, but you can't come down too far because you'll find that you won't be able to get a wire that fits comfortably into that wire line without having to maybe cut it and so on, which is perfectly possible to do, but it is a bit of a palaver. It needs some sort of specialist equipment slightly, and it is something that I personally would avoid doing if at all possible. And so if I bring the bra in, really it's, when you think about it, it's the cup section, this is the underarm section, and this is the bit that would need to be scooped out or lowered more than the side seam and the back band. It will all need to be blended in together, but at this stage I wouldn't lower the top band on its own. Because as I said, it's more this section that needs to be scooped out than simply making this a bit shorter. So I'm sorry if you got all excited thinking I was going to show you how to do that, but really it's something that needs to be done at the stage when you're fitting the cups as well. If you want to change the size of the hook and eye in the back of your bra, either larger or smaller, that's really quite straightforward. I'll show you how to make it smaller, because I think most of the time people whose bra pattern calls for a 3x3 hook and eye feel that they would be more comfortable with a 2x3 hook and eye. So I'll show you how to lower it first, and then I'll just talk about if you want to go the other way. So the main thing to do is to measure the hook and eye piece that you want to use. The ones that I sell are, and these are kind of rough measurements because they're inches and they're actually measured in millimeters, but more or less a 3x3 hook and eye is 2 inches deep, and a 2x3 hook and eye is about 1 3/8 of an inch deep. So we'll need to take one away from the other to decide how much we need to come down. The other way to do it, of course, without all this measuring, if you don't like measuring, is to simply bring your hook and eye in, allowing for elastic allowance at the bottom. You can think, well, that's there. If I've only got a 2x3 hook and eye, I'm going to lose that one and I need it to come here. Or you can measure. Hopefully that makes sense. So bearing in mind it has to be above the elastic allowance line, just like all of the adjustments that I've talking through with you. Everything has to be pretending that this is the finished edge. So that's the finished edge. A 2x3 is more or less 1 3/8 inches, so that puts it there. And what I need to do now is to bring this line down to there. It's as simple as that, really. It's not rocket science, but it is something that can be a bit baffling if you're not entirely sure what you're doing, if you've never done this before. So you can bring it in a really messy curve like I've just done, or you could get a proper curve in, which if I can remember I put mine, I would use, or in all honesty you can just do a straight line. The pattern looks nice with a nice bit of a curve there, but this is all going to be stretched, and as it's stretched it naturally forms a curve anyway, and sometimes it's a lot easier to sew elastic on in a straight line because that's what it likes to do. But whether you want to draw a straight line or just work on a little bit of a curve in there, let me do it in red, pretending I've done it nice and neatly. Just come round to there, and then this piece can be chopped off, and there you've got it, the same depth of band, but this time only with a 2x3 hook and eye on it. If you wanted to swap the other way round, if your pattern had a 2x3 and you wanted to make it a 3x3, it's the reverse process. How much deeper does it have to be? And then you'd stick a piece of tissue in there, come up and go across. I think I don't think there's anything more complicated to say than that, but like I said, it's like with everything, it's easy when you know how. So that's if you want to have a different sized hook and eye to the one that's the pattern has been originally drafted for. If you needed to widen your bridge, I mentioned to you before about how you then need to check the position of this notch under here, which originally on the pattern was marked in blue, and then when I did it visually plus measured how much I made this wider, my new black mark is actually where the notch is going to be. And I mentioned that you're going to need to make some adjustments to the cup pattern pieces in order to be able to rotate your cup back into the right position. I think it's just a lot easier to, if I explain with a foam cup. I've made up a foam cup here. This is a fitting cup for a Shelley style, but it goes into the frame just the same. What I want to try and show you is the effect of doing this. So where this point here is the point that needs to match up to the notch. So my original notch was here, the blue one, and you can see that notch matches there, and the top edge of the upper cup is here. So that all fits in there quite nicely, and it comes around here, fits nicely at the side seam, just as it should do. But if I now, excuse me Norma, I'm just going to have to upend you a little bit. If I now move this cup to the new position, my new notch, okay, so I've rotated the cup upwards towards the center so that this now matches, you can see that everything else needs to change accordingly. So this notch here, which indicates where the top and upper cup meet, the cross cup seam in other words, that also needs to move, but so does the top edge of the cup. It's now too high, right? You can see that, can't you? Because it was here and then we've moved it round, so the upper cup is now too high, and conversely the underarm section is now too low. Okay, so the overall length of the wire line is going to be the same. It's the same wire that's going to go in here. So the overall length has to be the same, but now it's distributed slightly differently. So on your cup pattern pieces, you'll need to shorten the upper cup by the amount that it pokes up, which logically is going to be 1/2 inch, yes, because that's where we've moved it. Shorten your upper cup 1/2 inch and lengthen the underarm section by 1/2 inch. So if I show you that on here, so here's my front frame pattern piece, and my new notch is 1/2 inch further towards the center front, so that's there now. And then I need to change this one, and also if you have a notch around here you'll have to change that one. Okay, so all by the same amount, 1/2 inch, like that. So I've marked up my new front frame piece, pattern piece, with the notches in the new positions. So then I'll need to bring my cup pieces over. Now remember, this is simply a length or a redistribution, if you like. It's not a fitting for the cup, so please don't think that that's what we're going to be doing. All I need to do is to compensate for what I've done here with the actual cup pieces. And so I would measure the difference, 1/2 inch. I mean, ideally you would in your fitting band, you would take the cup out of your fitting band and reposition it so that this seam, if you have a seam here, or the notch on your bottom cup piece is in that position, and properly try it out. But logically it's going to be a 1/2 inch difference, and so we quickly take 1/2 inch off this upper edge of the top cup. So literally mark 1/2 inch and then reconnect those points. This is a straight line, the upper edge, the top edge of the upper cup. So we'll just do that and cut that off. And then the bottom cup, this is the underarm edge here, the whale tail area, that would just need to have a piece of tissue popped underneath. Stick that down like that and mark 1/2 inch away from that point there. Sorry, you can't see, there we go, that point there. Mark 1/2 inch away and connect that like that, and then with a curve, which I actually have got now rather than do it freehand, you need to just let the curve edge carry on from where it is already. So just carry on that curve up to there, and then this becomes your new pattern piece. There and there. Okay, so that piece is longer. This piece would be shorter, but by the same amount. So the overall wire line is going to still be the same. I hope that makes sense to you. It's one of those things that actually makes a lot more sense when you do it than trying to follow somebody's instructions, and it's a lot easier to show than it is to try and explain. But I hope you realise the reason for doing this is because you need to rotate this cup back to where it should be to avoid getting this flattening that I find happens in that area. Okay, so if you have needed to make any of those alterations that I've just been through, taking a pinch out of the depth or taking a dart in at the side, or altering your hook and eyes, the width of your hook and eyes, the time has come really now for you to make those alterations to your pattern and probably recut a new band, because obviously nearly all of them involve the front and the back band, especially if you're having to reshape your bottom edge. There's no way you can kind of not cheat, but there's no way you can kind of fudge that. It has to now be all done. And although you might think, well, if all I need to do is to take a little pinch out of the side seam, you could sew that. Yeah, of course you could, or you could pin it temporarily. If that's the only thing you need to do, I suppose you could get away with that, really. But anything else, especially if you're needing to shorten the side seam and reshape the bottom edge, you really do now need to start again, probably, and make a whole new band. So it's not necessarily good news, but just think of how much time you've saved by doing all of this so far, rather than you probably would have had to make 2 or 3 more bras by now. And so console yourself with that. So whether you need to make a complete new bra or whatever you need to do that. Go ahead and make these pattern alterations, and then I'll meet you back here for the third fitting, where we'll be looking at the final part of the band, which is the straps, and also we'll look at any other alterations we need to make in the back band. Now, I spoke about earlier on when we were doing the fitting, I was talking about the downward hike, where the crook and eye section rises up. I'm going to cover that in this next section, because although it's not to do with straps as such, if you need to make any other alterations to your back band to do with the straps, then really the downward hike needs to be the last thing that you do, because it becomes a lot more complicated if you've done that already, to then do any other alterations to the back band. So that's why I haven't spoken about it now. If you were waiting for me to, I will do it in a little while. Okay, so meet you back here for the final part of fitting your fitting band. Now we're ready to look at our final fitting, or hopefully our final fitting anyway, of this fitting band, and we're going to look at the straps as the final part. Now that you've got the band sitting around you the way you want it to be, and you've got it depth wise how you want it to be, the last thing to look at is the straps, and we're going to look at 3 aspects of the straps. First of all is the position of the straps, i.e. how they sit on your chest, how close to the center, how far apart you want them to be. Obviously this to a certain extent it depends on what style of bra you're making. Some bras, like a balconette style, deliberately have the straps quite wide set apart, but just because that's what the pattern says to do, it's all about making your own things. It's all about having it your own way. So we'll look at the position of the straps, we'll look at the angle of the straps, i.e. how it comes across over your shoulder and where it lands in your back. This is particularly important or interesting if you have a tendency for your straps to fall off your shoulders. This kind of won't fall off here because I've got a stiffener in there, but my shoulders, as you can maybe tell from Norma, are quite narrow in the shoulders, and so my straps do sit quite far over onto my shoulder here, and so if I'm not careful then the straps will fall off. Now sometimes, and the most obvious thing people think of if they have problems with straps slipping off, is because the straps are too long, and they may well be. We'll look at the length of the straps as the last thing that we look at, but sometimes, or quite often in fact, it's just the angle of the straps that are forcing them to go towards the outside. And so the way that we can fix that is by lengthening the back band a little bit, which ends up forcing the straps, or bringing the straps over more at that kind of an angle. Can you see more? So that's going to make it less likely to slip off, because it's sitting differently on your shoulder blade as it comes across here. So that's something that we'll look at. Also at this point I'm going to look at the back strap extension that I was talking about earlier in the previous section, where we're going to add a little bit of extra power net in this section to flatten any little bits of fluff that you might have going on there. And then lastly we'll look at doing the downward hike, which again I mentioned in the last section, where this rides up very slightly in the center along your spine, and with that little gap happening there. And I'm going to look at that last, because if you do need to extend the top edge of your band to alter the angle of your strap, and you also want to have a back strap extension to fill in this little area here, it's easier to do those 2 things first before you then do the downward hike at the end. It's simply because I find it easier to visualize, and also if you do this downward hike first, that alters the angle of all sorts of other things. I just find it more complicated, and this is the sequence that I find works easiest for me. But obviously if you don't need each of those other alterations, you just need the downward hike, then you can skip straight to that section at the end. So we'll look at all of those things, and when we've made those alterations, we'll come back at the end and look finally at the length of the straps when everything else is sitting where you want it to be sitting. Then as a final part, we'll just also take a little look at styling if you want to have a more of a Gothic arch on your band, or if you want your band to be more narrow than the pattern is allowing for. Personally, I do like a nice narrow band, because even though this isn't too wide, on me I have my ribs sort of stick out a little bit here, and I have a little shelf going on, and that tends to force my elastic to flip up like that. So if that happens to you, then I'll show you how you can make the band as thin as you can make it, really, while still having a band. They're more styling things, but I think it sort of fits in with the fitting band. If you're making a fitting band that's your go-to every time you want to make a new bra, then it's just as well to have it styled the way you want it, as well as having it fit the way it ought to. When it comes to altering the position of your straps, whether you want them closer to the front, the centre front, or a little bit further out to the side, ultimately the alteration has to be made on the upper cup pieces, because that's where the strap's going to attach to. You can see probably if I move this, whoops, without stabbing myself. If I want my strap to sit closer to the centre front, this is obviously quite an exaggeration, but if you want it to sit closer to the centre front, it has to attach to something, doesn't it? I mean, I can just stab it into normal, but that doesn't really work in real life, and so it has to attach to something, which is why we put cups in the fitting band in the first place. So I'm sure you can imagine that if I want my strap to come further there, this section of the cup has to move over that way for it to be stitched to. So ultimately it is a cup alteration that's going to fix the position of the straps. But I think when we're doing a fitting band and we're looking at the straps and the position we want them to be in, it's a good idea to at least pin it temporarily. I'm just going to move this in slightly. Pin it temporarily to where you think you want your straps to sit. And if it means that you need to maybe stitch an extra little piece of fabric in this section for it to attach to, that's all well and good, and that is one step closer to getting the fit right when you come to look at your cups at a later date. But if you alter the position of the straps at the front, it will have an effect on everything else. So altering this position, bringing it in more, is actually probably going to give your straps more of a tendency to fall outwards. And so if you currently don't have an issue with your straps slipping off your shoulders, you might do if you move your straps further in at the front. And so to compensate for that, you would need to alter the position, the angle of the straps in the back. So if you don't have an issue with that at the moment, you might do if you change the position of the straps at the front, and that's why, to my mind, it's worth doing temporarily in order to see how the rest of it works out. Because also if you move your straps across, change the angle here, it will affect if you want to have a back strap extension in this area. That will also be slightly different once you've moved your straps across. So I'm sure you're getting the message by now that one thing affects another. So it's best to sort out where you want your straps to be in the front at this stage, even though, as I said, ultimately it's a cup issue as to where the straps attach and not just the band. I'm going to start off by doing the adjustment that will change the angle of the strap so that it won't want to fall off your shoulders quite so easily. And then I'm going to straight away do the back strap extension, because each of them are quite short and straightforward, and they kind of go together quite nicely. So to start off with, I'm going to extend the top line of the back band towards the hook and eye attachment. Okay, so this is the side seam obviously, and this is the center of the back of the bra, and that's the bit that we want to extend. So I'm just going to pop a piece of paper underneath like that and tape that down. The amount that you need to extend this by is something that is a kind of trial and error really. It depends on the width of your back and by how much the straps nearly always fall off and how narrow your shoulders are. So having given you a whole set of reasons why you can't really measure it, it is hit and miss. I usually find that somewhere around 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch is quite a good starting point for most people. So that's what I'm going to do. It may be something that you have to try again after you've done it once and had a go at it. It's a suck it and see type of thing really, but a good place to start is I'm going to do 5/8 of an inch because I quite like 5/8 of an inch. There we are. So literally all I've done is place my ruler along the top edge of the back band piece, and from that corner I've come out 5/8 of an inch and just extended this line. And then all I need to do now is to connect my new top corner to the hook and eye attachment, and I'm going to just do it with a straight line. If you want to, you can do you can still scoop it out, but it's just personal preference. It doesn't really make any difference, and when you're wearing it anyway, the straps kind of form a curve naturally. So it depends on how artistic you're feeling, whether you want to do that or not. And then I'm just going to cut this piece out. Oops, not very well, but there we are. And then I don't need all this extra paper underneath, so I'm just going to chop that off. Oops. Okay, let's pop a bit more tape on there because that's not very safe. There we go. So I've added this much in, and if I just bring the bra across, you can see that now comparatively that comes across there, and so those straps will be coming across just a little bit more, just to change that angle there. All right, so that's kind of all there is to it really, to just literally extend that line and reattach the new spot to the hook and eye fastener there. So if we moving right along to do the back strap extension, again I'm going to pop my pattern onto another piece of paper like that, and usually something like maybe 2.5 to 2 3/4 inches is enough of an extension at the top here. I'm going to how wide is this? 2.5. I'm going to use that just as my guide. Just a quick line along the top. Now what I want to have happen is the strap extension is going to come up from here and come along and then scoop down to the side seam, and that will include then this whole section will then be covered in power net that will help to smooth out the back. So I don't want to come straight up because it just looks ugly, and you are going to need to sew strap elastic to there. So I just want to sort of do a little bit of an angle, something like that. Then I like to have this about 1 inch wide across the top there, because this is the point at which your strap elastic will come up and your top band elastic will come and need to tuck under. So it needs to be a reasonable width for all of those things to have happen and not be too fiddly to try and deal with. And then I want to scoop this down to meet the side seam here, so that my back band will, the front section will come along here, and then this power net section will go up there. You can do it, you know what I'm going to say, I'm going to do it freehand, and then I'm probably going to get a French curve in to tidy it up. But I want to come along here and come up there. Oh, that's not too bad. Something like that. So then, as I've said, this section here is now controlled with some power net. Don't make this too sharp of a curve, because as I keep saying, it has to have elastic stitch to it. Top band elastic is usually quite soft, and so it's relatively, and narrow, so it's relatively easy to manipulate that around there, but don't go too mad. And something like that should be fine. If your back piece is wider than that, you may want to make this angle just a little bit more, so that you've got space in here to scoop it down. But again, a little bit of trial and error, but quite straightforward to do. So I will cut this out. Along there. There we go. Okay, so that's my new back piece. It's slightly longer to bring my straps into the centre, and nice and high and comfortable with power net to control any fluff that's going on under there. So that's two birds with one stone, and you can do either one or the other. You don't have to do them both together, but it was quicker to show you them in the one go. When we do a downward hike, the aim is to take the hook and eye section that we noted was rising up a little bit on the fitting, take that section of the back band and tilt it down by the same amount that we saw that it was riding up. So on my fitting, when I ran a ruler along the bottom edge of the back band, I could see that there was about a ½ inch gap between the straight line of the ruler and the hook and eye section of the back band. And so I'm going to take that same section and tilt it down by the same amount, i.e. ½ inch. So whatever you will have noted on your own fitting, that's the amount that you're going to tip it down by. Now, I appreciate it is quite difficult to do anything around the back of yourself if you're on your own. So if you don't have somebody that could help you to measure that gap if it's happening on your band, then I suggest that probably the easiest way, or probably the only other way, is to stand with your back to a mirror and do a selfie of your back, and then you can gauge for yourself how much you need to tip this down. So usually it's around about ½ inch, ½ to ¾ inch is about the sort of average, at least on the people that I've done it for. Not many people need much more than that, and to be honest, if you need much less than that, it's probably not even worth doing. But see for yourself what your measurement should be. If you're not entirely sure, maybe start off with ½ inch and see how that works out. So first of all, I need to draw a line. Now, it's only the strap scoop and the hook and eye section that's going to be affected by this alteration. So I'm going to draw a line from the top corner here. This is the top edge of the band, from that top corner right the way down to the bottom, so that encompasses all of the strap scoop and the hook and eye attachment area. And then I've drawn on a separate little piece of paper two lines that are ½ inch apart, two parallel lines ½ inch apart, and this is going to be my whether I'm going to assess that I've dropped it down by ½ inch. So the first thing I am going to do is to pop this under here and rest this corner on the top line, not there but there where I can see it. So just rest it there. I'll pop a piece of tape on just so it doesn't wriggle about too much. Okay, and that's going to help me to know that I've drop this down by 1/2 inch. So the thing as ever is that we want this alteration to occur in the main body of the pattern piece, not including the elastic allowance. So I'm going to cut along the line that I've just drawn and make myself a little hinge. So we're going to just cut up to the top of the elastic allowance, and then I'll just whip this around and come down in the opposite direction, and try not to cut all the way through so that I've got a little bit of a hinge. Yay, it's worked. Okay. All right, so far so good. So then I can just take this piece and roll it down. So because I've made a little hinge, this is going to overlap until that bit comes down to there. Okay, so this is overlapped, which is fine, and this is opened up. If I didn't make a hinge, then it would get all creased and bubbly and be quite horrible. So try and remember that little tip to give yourself a hinge. And I'm going to take that down. So now this has opened up here to allow for this section to tilt downwards. I have to make good that. Clearly this is not any use as a pattern piece with a great big hole in it. So fill that space in, again with a little bit of tape, there and there. Okay, and I have to make this all better. Now what I need to do, this was the point where I drew my line, was the top corner, if you like, of the top edge of the band, and that is the section that has to be reattached to the hook and eye attachment. You kind of, looking at this, you kind of want to think, oh, I'll just draw a straight line across there then, and that will be okay. But then by doing that, you will have extended the top edge of your bra band so that now it'll be all loose. This is the size we want it to be, just this size here. So it's this point that I'm going to reattach to the top of the hook and eye section, just like that. Okay, so this bit's not going to be here anymore, and that's going to be my new piece there, like that. Okay, so I'll just chop that off now that I'm talking about it. I'm just doing it in a straight line. If you wanted to make it a little bit of a curve, you can, but it doesn't really matter, and sometimes it's easier to stitch the elastic when it's just a straight line. So that's so far so good there, but then we have to do something with this bottom edge. I actually can take this spare piece of paper off, I don't need it anymore. It was just my guideline. There we go, let's clear that out of the way. So now I have this, it's quite a sharp angle, which I don't really want it to be. So I'm going to, let me see, what's the best? Nope. Let's bring this piece in. I just want to get rid of that piece there. I should have left my piece of paper there, shouldn't I? There we go. Just a very slight curve, just because elastic doesn't like angles. There we are. Okay, so that now is my pattern piece with a nice little curve at the bottom there, and this section now dips down nicely to make a straight line across my back. Now that's on this regular back pattern piece that hasn't had any alterations done to it. But if you had done any of the alterations that I showed before, if you've extended the back top of the back band to re-angled the strap, or if you've done the back strap extension, your pattern piece looks a bit more tricky and possibly a bit more sort of technical. So I'll just do the same alteration on this pattern piece, just to kind of show you how it's going to be. So I can take my little 1/2 inch lines piece of paper that I used just now and pop that back in there. Just as my guide. You don't have to do this bit if you want to just measure it some other way, but I find it easier to have a visual guide. So we've got to isolate the strap attachment and the hook and eye attachment, and so I'm going to, this time the top corner isn't here anymore, it's this top corner of the back strap extension. So same rules apply. I need to be perpendicular to the dog's line and up there in that corner, and come straight down like that. Okay, hopefully that's making that clear. And the same thing then, I'm going to cut up through the elastic allowance section just to the top there, and then I'm going to cut down and hopefully leave myself a hinge to do the downward hike. There we go. Okay, this time I'm going to leave my piece of paper there to help me draw my curve. So the same thing applies. Pick this section up, let that hinge across there, and drop it down so that the corner comes down to the 1/2 inch or whatever measurement you need it to come down to, just there like that. Take that in place, because as you can see it wants to keep wriggling away. There we go. Take that there, take that together. Okay, so this is opened up, but this is the point, this top corner here, that's the point that has to connect back to the top of the hook and eye attachment. So I'm going to pop my spare piece of paper in again. See Daisy, I can find it. There we go. Just nab a piece of paper and slide that in place in there. I do like this cut and spread method for pattern alterations. It's quite a Blue Peter moment to be doing sticking and spreading paper. There we go. Okay, so now I'll do this in red just so to make it even more obvious what I'm doing. I'm connecting the top corner of the band down to the hook and eye section there. As I say, in a straight line, or if you wanted to, you could pop a curve in and do that instead. Actually, I might do that. That looks okay. There. It serves no purpose other than to look nicer on the pattern, but straight line or slight curve, it is up to you how to do it. So that's those two pieces. Oh no, sorry, bottom edge. There, like that. And then cut that away along there. Whoops. Sorry, more haste, less speed. And chop that bit off there. It all looks very Frankenstein-y, doesn't it, when it's all done, when it's a work in progress. But as I've said about all of the pattern alterations, after you've done them, you're going to retrace everything onto a fresh, clean piece of paper and mark it up with version 2 or 3 or whatever you're doing. So those are my two pieces. The same adjustment, but two slightly different pieces. And the last thing to do is to remark the dog's line. Now, the sort of general rule, or what we like to have in the back band, is that the dogs run parallel to the hook and eye attachment, because that's the hook and eye attachment is the bit that's going to give you the tension. So you need the dogs in the power net to be running still perpendicular to the hook and eye attachment. So it doesn't now, you can see that's there and this is now there. So we're going to redraw it. And I just like to, you can pop a ruler on there, make sure your ruler is following the hook and eye line, and then pop in your new dog's line there on that piece. That's how that's going to go, and the same thing on this piece. So this is my hook and eye attachment section, and I want to draw a line that's perpendicular to that. Whoops, cross out the one I don't need, and that's my new dog's line on those pieces there. Okay, so that's the downward hike on the back band. The final part of fitting your fitting band is to look at the length of the straps and work out exactly what's best for you. So in the beginning, when we did sewing a fitting band, I suggested that you used non-stretch strap tape for the front part of the strap, and then cut it longer than it says in the pattern or that you think you'll need, so that you can mark. I've put 1 inch increments, you can put a centimetre or whatever you think makes sense for you, but I've just marked some increments in there so that I'll know if I pinch this up to make it fit better, I will know how much I've pinched it up by. So when we think about a bra strap, it is in 2 parts really, although we sort of think of it as a continuous thing that runs from front to back. It's in 2 parts. So the back part of the strap must always be elastic, and proper bra strap elastic that's quite, it's stretchy but it's quite firm. And obviously it has sliders here so that you can adjust it slightly. But generally speaking, the back part of the strap is elastic, and for most people, now obviously there's always going to be people who are outside of a range, whether much shorter or much longer, but in my kits I put in 1 meter of strap elastic. If you're having all elastic straps, which I'll talk about in a minute, then that's fine. If you're having fabric straps, then you'll only need to use 1/2 meter divided between these 2 areas. So roughly the elastic in the back strap section is about 10 inches, 25 centimeters long. And the reason why it absolutely has to be elastic is it's attaching to a stretchy fabric in the back here, the power band. It needs to match. If this were stable and this was stretchy, you'd have all sorts of issues going on. So it needs to match the fabric that's being attached to. But also if the whole of your strap was solid, if it was all fabric, you wouldn't be able to get the strap up onto your shoulder when you put your bra on, and you wouldn't be able to easily slip it off either. So that's one reason. And the other reason is for it to be flexible, because your back is curvy, you have shoulder blades. I mean, Norma doesn't have shoulder blades, bless her, but we have shoulder blades. Different people have different curvatures. You need elastic for it to be able to mold, if you like, or work with your body. And also as you move, this needs to be able to move and flex with you, otherwise it would be extremely uncomfortable if it didn't. So the back rather, is always elastic. The front part of the strap can also be elastic, or it can be fabric. So for example, in this Shirley style bra, the front part of the strap is fabric to match the cups. Whether it's fabric or whether it's elastic, it has to be stable, because the front part of the strap is there. Its main job is to keep the upper cup in place. If you had no strap, obviously it would just fall down. And then maybe, I don't know, 10 or 15% of what it does is to help with support and lift. Most of the support in a bra comes from the tension in the band and the underwire, as I've repeatedly said. That's where the support is coming from. Your bra strap is not there to keep your breasts up. That's kind of, I think, what a lot of us, before we find out more about bras and what they do and so on, you kind of think that the straps are there to hold your breasts up, and they absolutely are not. They're going to help, like I just said, but that's not their job, to keep your breasts up. And so the front half has to be stable, because if it was all elastic, then you'd have no real support. This would all be bouncing around. If any of you have run for a bus or whatever, you'll know it all bounces, and you don't want that. You want this to be nice and stable. So that's the job of the front part of the bra. Now, if you want to, obviously, if you do it in fabric, it's stable as it is, assuming you're using a stable fabric, of course. But if you want to use elastic all the way front and back of your bra, then you'll need to, sorry, let me just try and put that there. You'll need to stabilize the elastic. So, and the way to do that is with something like a nice satin ribbon or something. Let me bring her forward and hold it up there. I think you can see better. Something that's nice and soft, because this is going to be against your skin, obviously. And so satin ribbon is quite nice. And you can either, it has to be stitched to the elastic, so that the elastic, you can see this is elastic. See it stretching there, but this bit doesn't stretch because now it's been stabilized with the ribbon and with stitching. There's two ways of dealing with this. You can either make a feature out of it. So I quite like to use a machine embroidery stitch that's quite wide, that's going to hold the ribbon in place. So that's quite nice if your ribbon is more narrow than your elastic. That holds it in place. Because the other way of doing it is simply with 2 rows of straight stitching around either side. Now I've done it black in the bobbin so that you can see where the stitching lines are, but in the front you can't really see them, as long as they're quite close to the edge of the elastic. If your elastic is more narrow than your if your ribbon is more narrow than your elastic, then your stitching lines would be sort of in the main part of the strap, and they would show more, I think, and that's why I like to use an embroidery stitch. But whatever you do, please do remember that the front part of your strap has to be stable. Okay, so then we need to gauge how long the straps need to be. What you don't want is for the straps to be digging into your shoulders, but unless you've got absolutely no spare flesh on you whatsoever, you will always get a slight dent, because this, not as squishy as Norma is, but all of us have a certain amount of flesh in here, and anything that you put on it is going to cause a dent. But what you don't want is a big old dent that's red and angry looking, because that's obviously suggests that there's far too much pressure in this part of your bra. So for that reason, when you're judging the length of your strap, I would suggest that you put the fitting band on and wear it for, I don't know, half an hour or something, and then you'll properly tell whether this is too short or not, and whether it's really digging in. You will always have a little red mark where the strap has been, because you've had some pressure. I mean, if you just kind of pressed hard with your thumb for a few minutes, and when you take it away, it'll end up with a red mark there. So there'll always be a slight reddening and an imprint of the strap on your shoulder. But as I said, what it shouldn't be is deep, and it shouldn't be red and angry looking. So you won't really tell that until you've kind of had it on for a while, and the band has adjusted to the weight of your breasts and so on. So having been wearing it, say, and you can then judge how long it is. Now what we're looking for is if this section is too short. So if the stabilized section of your strap is too short, it will cause this elastic part to start to stretch a little bit too much. This is always going to be under tension. That's kind of how it works, really. Elastic really only works if there's some tension on it. But what you don't want is for it to be really, really stretched and at its kind of fullest extent all the time, because it will just really quickly wear out. And also, I don't know if you can see, let me tilt her up a bit. This is supposed to be straight across here. If you haven't done the back strap extension that I spoke of earlier, this top edge should be straight. But if my strap is too short, it starts to pull it up. Can you see it's riding up here? And also, I don't know if you can really properly tell through here, but as I pull it, so the power net starts to expand upwards and weaken. You can see through it a bit more. Yep. So, and also in extreme cases, it can cause the middle part of the hook and eye to come up with it as well. So it won't look quite right, as well as I say, after a quite comparatively short time, it will be very uncomfortable. So we're wanting this to be straight, and for it to still be under some tension. This is not as much tension as I want it to have, because as I say, I intentionally left it long. So I can think, okay, let me just take this up a little bit and pinch it out so that I can sort of, you'd know by the feel of it on your body, but pinch it out so that it feels right. So there's some tension in here. This is still fairly straight, and it's not digging in too much. If you pull it up too much, apart from what it might do in the back, it's also going to cause an issue in the cup. So this cup is sitting here, and it needs fitting, properly fitting, but it's sort of okay. It doesn't look too saggy like that, for example, which would obviously mean your strap's too long, and it kind of looks okay. But if I make this too short, can you see how it starts to pull, and we start getting stress lines running along here? So when you're doing a cup fitting, you might see that and think, oh well, okay, I need to take some out of here and do this, that and the other with it. But actually it's not necessarily the volume of the cup that's causing the problem, but the fact that the fabric is being pulled up too much at the top there. So as I've said, if you've got an intentionally too long strap and you've got some markings, you can adjust it and try it and wear it for another 10 minutes or so and see if that works, until you get a nice happy medium between some support and some comfort. Well, not some comfort, all comfort really, that it doesn't dig in and it still does its job. Okay, so hopefully that's given you a little bit of insight into bra straps. As I say, what I would like to come away with, if nothing else, is the idea that a strap, although it goes from front to back, is actually in two different parts, and each part, the back part and the front part, have different jobs to do. And so the back always has to be elastic, the front has to always be stable. And then once you've established whether your strap is too long or too short, you can go back to the strap pattern piece and adjust it. So I'll just grab my pattern piece. So even if this were elastic, it's going to need to be stable, and so the pattern piece that's come with your bra pattern is still relevant. If I take this, let's put her up here, you can see better. So this piece of elastic is pretty much the same size as the pattern piece. There we go. And it's been stabilized. So I can quite happily, and this is the front strap, you see, I can quite happily use this pattern piece to be adjusted. So if I needed to make it longer, I would simply, well, you can just extend the end. I always like to do pattern alterations in the middle part of the pattern, just to make sure it's all even, but extend it by however much you need. Always the blunt end, okay? So on all of the pin-up girl patterns, you have a tapered end to your strap and a blunt end to your strap. the blunt end always stitches to the cup. The tapered end is so it can go through the ring at the back of the band and attach to the elastic section. So the blunt end is the end that you're always going to want to extend. Or if you want it to be shortened, it's the section that you're going to shorten. So if I wanted to, I would take my adjusted strap. So if I want to take 1 inch out of here, make sure that's comfortable, I would then unpin it from here and measure the finished length and adjust this accordingly and cut a piece off if it's too long. It's not quite brain surgery, this section. It's really quite straightforward, as long as you remember it's the blunt end that you're working on and leave the tapered end alone. Okay, so once you've done all of that, you should have a super duper fitting, nice and comfortable fitting band that you can go forward with when you want to come and start fitting cups and trying out new styles, etc. So those are all the pattern alterations and the fitting adjustments that we've run through for the fitting band, including the straps. So if you've been following that through and identified and made the alterations that you need for your pattern, hopefully you are now at the point where you have a fitting band that is just what you want it to be. And if you had to spread the bridge, then you've relocated your cups. Everything's all hunky-dory. So the last thing I just wanted to talk to you about that I think might be a good, I was going to say a fitting place, but a good place to add this in is if you want to make a couple of styling alterations to your fitting band so that you've got that ready going forward for your bras. And so as I said at the introduction to this third fitting section, we can make the band under the cups very thin. If you have an issue with the band rolling up or the elastics flicking up underneath your breasts, we can make that much thinner. If I compare it to this one, this band here is obviously quite visible, whereas on this bra it's virtually invisible. And also the Gothic arch. Now I'm not really going to talk too much about the Gothic arch because I have a separate video all about that, how to draft it and how to sew it. But I'm going to add it into the fitting band pattern that I've been working on. So first of all, let's have a look at how to make a really narrow band. Let's pop that out of the way. I'm going to show you it on the unadulterated front frame piece, and then I will show you what it looks like on the pattern piece I've been working on throughout this video, just so you can see what it looks like in real life as opposed to in theory. So the thing is, we need to do just some little calculations, some measurements to work out how thin we can actually go with the band. And so on the pattern, we need to consider that this pattern's got seam allowances and elastic allowances already built in. So we need to kind of see where that's going to leave us. We need to allow 1/4 inch seam allowance around here. This is where the cup is going to sew into the bowl of the frame. So we have to have that piece there. So I've written that up here, I don't know if you can see. So seam allowance 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters, whatever method of measurement you like to use. So that's the first thing that I've put in there. So we'll call that 1. Then the second thing I need to allow for is the underwire channeling, because that has to obviously sit underneath your breast as part of the band. So the underwire channeling is 3/8 inch wide, or at least the type that I sell and use is. So 3/8 inch, which is the same as 1 centimeter. I'm marking that in. Just like that. Don't need to go all the way around. It's really just this section here underneath where the notch is and underneath the breast that we need to concentrate on. So that's my 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch in there for the channeling. And the last thing we need to allow for is the bottom band elastic, which the one that I'm using is 3/4 of an inch wide, which is 19 millimeters. So I need to add that in as well. So we just pop that in. You could mark each of these lines in a different colour if it helps you to visualize it better. Come round to there, a bit more out to here. I don't think I need to allow it any past there, but that's, so this section here, from here to here, that's the most narrow that you can have it if you're using 3/8 of an inch channeling and 3/4, that looks a bit weird, doesn't it? 3/4 of an inch elastic. That's better. I thought it didn't look quite even. Okay. There we are, that's better. So that's the minimum that we can get away with on this particular bra. Now obviously if you had 1/2 inch elastic, you could measure that as 1/2 inch and so on. But that's what you need to have. You can't go any lower than that. So you would need to, and I'm going to carry this line up to put in my Gothic arch at the same time. So I could do away with all that much fabric underneath the breasts on the band and still have a band, but just as thin as it can be. We'd now need to blend this rather back to the side seam. That, and then the whole of that section can go, and then I would know that I've got enough space in here to get everything all sort of crowded in together. So if I bring this one back in that I've shown you, you can see on the inside how the channeling is barely above the bottom line. All you can really see showing is the kind of picot edge of the elastic, like that. So that's how it's going to end up being, like that. So that would be the draft for making your band narrow, and those are the calculations that you need to bear in mind when you're working it out. So just to show you in real life, I suppose, what happens if you've also done a whole bunch of other alterations as you've been going along. So this is my pattern piece that I've been working on, where I have raised the side seam because it was all creasing up at the side, and I have extended my bridge, and then I've put in my Gothic arch, and this along the bottom here is going to be my finished pattern edge. It's very messy because I'm trying to do it quickly and also in such a way as you can see what I'm doing. There, so this red line would now be the bottom edge of my pattern, and I've blended it up. I already had a curve here from where I had shortened my side seam, so now I can blend all of that in, and if I cut it all the way, we'll be able to see it in all its glory, and to see that it does end up with a nice smooth line. That comes away, and that then is my pattern piece. So you can see that there's quite a lot less fabric here than there was originally in that pattern piece. Okay, so you can do away with quite a bit of fabric and still have a nice secure band. It looks quite pretty, and it does, as I've said, stop that flip up underneath the breast. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed all of these insights into how to do fitting and pattern alterations, and it's helped you, or it will help you, to sort out some of the issues that you may have been having with your band. And also I hope it's shown you a little bit that you really must get the band to fit nicely before you can start to tackle the cups. And so then this, I'm going to, you'll probably see it in future videos, but I will make all this up nice and neatly without having bits of channeling flapping around or the channeling on the outside, as I did have. So that will be my fitting band, and each time when I show you how to do cup alterations in a future video, that will be the band that I'm using, and I'll show you then how to take cups in and out of it. But one thing I must say, if you have been using wash away thread throughout this process of doing the fitting for the fitting band, when you make your final one that you're happy with, do sew it up properly, nice and neatly with regular thread. Don't do the wash away thread for your final one, because it's going to see probably a lot of action as you try different cup styles and different fittings and so on, and you'll be using that band quite a bit. It does need to be quite robust and also to be able to withstand washing, which of course it won't do if you use the wash away thread. So good luck with all of that. Do let me know in the comments, or you can email me separately through the website and so on, how you get on with it. If you have any issues, please just drop me an email and I'll try and help you. And if you've enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel, and then you'll get notified of all my future videos. Thank you so much and good luck.